can start with you, Ritesh.
Thank you.
What has been your experience taking UPI abroad? What have been the factors that have enabled this?
So I think before I answer your question, I would like to, highlight that it took SWIFT about 45 to 50 years to be where they are today. And it took international card schemes about 65 to 70 years to be where they are today. So I think there's a lot of hard work that will go into it. And as in India, we use this word called jugaad. For international audience, we will improvise and we'll be there. So as long as we have clarity on the use cases that we are going to serve, right? As long as we see advantage in terms of building interoperability, and which my fellow panelists have clearly, articulated. So there is merit, and there are use cases that need to be solved. And for example, I think a couple of months back, I was talking to some parents whose kids, study in North America, to take example, Canada. And every time they have to send money, they pay about 10 to 12% as the remittance charges. Now that is not sustainable, and they deserve better. So we have to, explore possibilities with other, schemes like what we are doing with Pay Now in Singapore. And so we have clarity on the use cases, we have clarity on the advantages. Now there are considerations that we will have, like anything new that you do, there are considerations that you kind of look for. And in case of interoperability, I think the considerations are, at least from India perspective, we need to have a sovereign solution, we need to have a secure and simple solution like we have done in case of UPI, very simple to use, and it has to have the right kind of speed. We can't have 7 days or 3 days for one person to send money overseas, so it has to be instant. And at the same time, it has to deliver economic advantages, as Sharab ji just mentioned. So we are mindful of these considerations. Now, how it will evolve, we are exploring bilateral partnerships, like we have a partnership with Bhutan, we have one with Singapore as well for RuPay and UPI acceptance. For merchant payments, we are building one for personal payments. So I think, as I said earlier, we will see how it evolves. There are possibilities of bilateral, and there are possibilities of a multilateral. And we will go basis our own, existing flows and our own, market requirements. In case of a multilateral, maybe there could be a mapper in future, which could look at massaging the data between different ecosystems and make it consumable for a particular environment. That could be a possibility. So, but it's future, it's uncertain, but we are committed to solving these problems, and hopefully we'll be there.
We should not confuse merchant payments from real-time transfer. They're two different things. When you do merchant payments, the risk liabilities are quite different. In fact, there's no such thing there. You can manage with minimal risk liability transfer. When you do real-time gross settlement from bank account to bank account across the border, all this assumption in the merchant payments doesn't hold anymore true. So if we mix this to discussion, you may get a wrong outcome. So you got to be very careful in any conference, any panel, mix this to discussion. It'll give a wrong understanding to people here. I just want to make it very clear from a policy outcome. Because that can have an extreme. There's no sanctioned country for merchant payments, right? There's no central bank grey list for merchant payments. You only get for account transfers. So there are two different things.
I'll quickly move on to Juliet. Juliet, so M-Pesa, incredible success story in Kenya. I think about 96% financially included, up from 8 or 10% maybe 10, 15 years ago. Millions lifted out of poverty. My question to you is, you've tried to take M-Pesa outside Kenya to other parts of Africa, and I think you also initially tried in India as well. I think that has not met with the same success as it has in Kenya. So I was wondering if you could share with us, what worked, what didn't, and could interoperability have been one of the factors?
So I think that's a really good question. I think a good place to start is with the origin of M-Pesa. So M-Pesa came about to solve a problem of transferring money, a problem of sending money back home within Kenya. And out of that built so many different use cases and ways in which M-Pesa could be used. So I think that was the first success. I think we focused, and it has kind of been mentioned here, is that we focused on solving one problem to begin with, and then out of that, we built the trust, we built the rails, and that then transformed into a platform that we see today. So I think if we look at other markets which thinking about dynamics in different countries, what we've realized is dynamics are very different. The technology, as you've mentioned, is not usually the problem. The problem may not even be the business case, perhaps, but it could be a regulatory challenge. It could be a customer, behavioral thing where customers are not particularly, looking for that particular problem to be solved, and you then need to be able to address a particular problem in a particular market. So, when you look at it that way, then you see how much context is important in terms of the success of M-Pesa. We have been able to move into, I think, 6 other markets, and most recently Ethiopia, or soon to be Ethiopia. And that's a key learning for us, is that each market is very different. We focus on solving the problem, on building partnerships. We're not trying to do everything under the sun. And so in that way, then we're able to build also cross-border transfers through partners. We focus on partnerships in the ecosystem. And in that way, we're able to then reach multiple players. In M-Pesa, you can also transfer money across certain other M-Pesa players. I think this is also a contextual thing, but not necessarily merchant payments or P2P, but you can withdraw. So for example, if you are in Tanzania, you can withdraw money from your M-Pesa, from your Kenyan or Safaricom M-Pesa account because of the M-Pesa that's sitting in both markets. So there are certain levels of interoperability that have been achieved. I think a lot of it is bilateral. It's, some of these operator engagements with minimal regulatory barriers. That's how we've been able to achieve it. Interestingly, in a lot of our countries, we're also still trying to address interoperability within the country. So there's that other aspect which is really interesting to watch, in that the central banks are putting up, say, switches and mandating certain levels of interoperability, getting involved in, how those need to be carried out or undertaken. And so that's, another, maybe a conversation for another day, but it's just, if we're talking about context and the different dynamics, perhaps the Africa context is also slightly different from maybe what we're discussing here today.
Yes, thank you so much.